Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
There was a small KFC on the edge of town, the kind of place people stopped at late at night after long drives, half asleep and desperate for something greasy to eat. It stayed open until 2 a.m., and the staff always hated the closing shift. Most of the town was quiet by then, but the fluorescent lights of that building seemed to attract the strangest people. One former employee named Darren shared his story online, and it spread fast because of how unsettling it was. He had worked there for 3 years, usually on the late shift, and he swore the place was cursed. He said it wasn't just the occasional drunk customer or fight in the parking lot. It was what happened inside when the doors were locked and the fryers turned off. It always started the same way. Around midnight, when the lobby was empty and the last few cars in the drive-thru had pulled away, they'd hear footsteps in the dining area. The sound was heavy, like boots dragging across tile. At first, they thought it was just people sneaking in, but whenever they checked, the chairs were still up on the tables, the doors were locked, and the place was empty. Then the smell would come, an overwhelming stench, not like fried chicken, but like something rotten, wet, and old. Darren said it filled the kitchen, clinging to his clothes, even though he knew he had just scrubbed everything clean. One night, while closing with a coworker named Lisa, he heard someone pounding on the back door. Not knocking, slamming over and over until the steel rattled. Lisa screamed and dropped the mop, but when Darren went to the security monitor, there was no one outside, just the empty alley and the buzzing of the light above the dumpster. He swore the pounding continued even while he stared at the blank screen. When he finally built up the nerve to open the door, there was nothing but silence and cold air. The worst night happened a few weeks later. They had closed up, and Darren was counting the register while Lisa stocked cups. She called his name, and when he looked up, her face was pale. She pointed to the dining area. In the reflection of the glass, someone was sitting at a table, a man, completely still, staring straight at the counter. But when Darren turned to look directly, there was nobody there, just empty tables and chairs stacked on top of each other. They both saw the reflection, though. The man had long, wet hair, and his shirt looked torn and stained. He never blinked, never moved, just stared. They ran out that night without finishing the close. Other employees came forward later saying similar things happened to them, things moving on their own, voices whispering from the freezer, the sound of the fryer sizzling even when it was unplugged. One even claimed to see a figure crouched in the corner of the walk-in cooler, grinning with black teeth. Eventually, the store was remodeled, and some say that stopped the activity. But Darren quit before then. He said no job was worth the way that place made him feel. The final straw was when he was alone closing one night, sweeping under the tables. When he turned around, every single chair had been taken down from the tables and placed neatly on the floor. He locked the broom in the closet, walked out the front door, and never went back. Locals still talk about that KFC. Some swear the chicken tastes different there, like it absorbs something from the building itself. And if you ever go late at night, sit by the window and look at the reflection in the glass. Sometimes you'll catch a man staring back at you, even if nobody is sitting there.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
It was late on a rainy Friday night when Daniel decided to stop at a KFC on the edge of town. One of those old ones that never seemed to have more than a couple cars in the lot. He had just finished a long shift and didn't feel like cooking, so greasy chicken sounded perfect. When he pulled in, the lot was empty except for a single beat-up van parked way in the back, engine still running. The fluorescent lights above the entrance flickered, casting the building in an unsettling glow. Inside, the place looked almost deserted, but the smell of fried chicken still filled the air. At the counter stood a young cashier with dark circles under her eyes. She barely spoke, just punched in his order while glancing nervously toward the kitchen. Daniel tried to make small talk, but she avoided eye contact, whispering his total like she didn't want to be overheard. When he sat down at a booth, the restaurant was eerily quiet. No music, no kitchen clatter, not even the hum of a fryer. The only sound was a low thud from behind the counter every few seconds, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Daniel assumed maybe it was just late-night prep work, but then the cashier slipped into the kitchen through the swinging doors. Moments later, he heard her muffled voice. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was begging. He could hear her whispering, "Please, just let me go home tonight. Please." Then came a sharp metallic slam, followed by silence. Before he could process what he'd heard, the swinging door creaked open just a crack. From his booth, Daniel caught a glimpse of something that froze him in place. A tall man in a grease-stained apron stood in the shadows, holding what looked like a butcher's cleaver. His skin was pale and waxy, his smile stretched far too wide, and he stared right at Daniel through the narrow gap in the door. The door slowly swung shut again, but Daniel couldn't breathe. His food was never brought out. He sat paralyzed until the cashier returned, eyes red, carrying his tray. She set it down without a word, her hands trembling. He noticed one of her sleeves was ripped, and there was something dark smeared on the cuff. Daniel leaned forward to whisper, "Are you okay?" But she quickly shook her head, eyes darting toward the kitchen, silently warning him not to say another word. The chicken on his tray smelled off, like it hadn't been cooked right. Something about the meat looked strange, the skin rubbery and gray. He pushed it aside, his appetite gone. Then he heard the van outside rev its engine. The cashier flinched, her face draining of color. Daniel knew he had to leave. He grabbed his jacket, muttered a thank you, and hurried toward the door. As he pushed it open, he glanced back. The tall man from the kitchen was standing in the corner of the dining room now, partially hidden in the shadows, watching him with that same stretched grin. He hadn't made a sound, and Daniel had no idea how long he'd been standing there. Daniel bolted to his car, locked the doors, and sped off without looking back. But when he got home and opened the bag, his stomach dropped. Inside wasn't just chicken. It was a strip of blood-stained fabric, the same pattern as the cashier's torn sleeve. The KFC closed permanently just a week later, boarded up overnight without warning. Nobody in town ever talked about it, but sometimes, when Daniel drives past that stretch of road, he swears he still sees that same van idling in the lot, engine running, waiting for someone else to stop in.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
Late one night, a young man named Arif was working the graveyard shift at a KFC on the outskirts of Dhaka. Business was slow, and the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, shifting shadows across the empty restaurant. Arif had worked there for months, and though the job was tedious, he never expected anything frightening to happen. Until that night. Around 2 a.m., he noticed a man lingering near the entrance. The man wasn't ordering. He was just staring at the counter with an intensity that made Arif uneasy. When he asked if the man wanted anything, he only smiled, a cold, unnatural smile, and said nothing. Shrugging it off as some eccentric customer, Arif went back to cleaning. Minutes later, he heard whispering, faint but unmistakable, coming from the storage room. He hesitated, then stepped in, only to find the room empty. The whispering continued, now behind him. Spinning around, he saw the man from earlier standing right in the corner, watching him, eyes too wide and unblinking. Arif's heart raced, but when he blinked, the man was gone. He tried calling his manager, but the phone line was dead. The lights began to flicker more violently, and the temperature dropped sharply. The fryer, still bubbling with hot oil, began to hiss and sputter unnaturally, as if reacting to some unseen presence. Suddenly, the smell of fried chicken, overwhelmingly strong, filled the room, but it was rancid, rotten like meat left to rot in a dumpster. Arif turned toward the counter and froze. There, smeared across the countertop, was a handprint, fresh, wet, and impossibly large. And in the grease trap below, he noticed movement, a pale skeletal hand emerging slowly, as if someone or something was trying to crawl out from beneath the restaurant itself. He ran toward the exit, only to find the door locked from the outside. Panic overtook him as the whispering became a chorus of voices chanting his name. The man reappeared inches from his face, eyes black as coal. A voice, hollow and gurgling, came from the man. "You shouldn't be here. We never leave." By the time the morning shift arrived, the manager found the doors wide open and the fryer still running, but Arif was gone. Nothing was ever found except a smear of grease leading into the basement, where the security cameras revealed something that no one could explain. The camera footage showed Arif handing a bucket of chicken to the man, who then vanished into thin air, leaving only the echo of that cold, unnatural smile. Since that night, employees whisper about a shadowy figure that sometimes appears after closing, lingering near the fryer, waiting for the next unlucky soul to work alone at KFC.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
It was a quiet Friday night when a group of college friends decided to grab a late dinner at the local KFC. The restaurant was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly overhead. One of them, Jamal, noticed a man sitting alone in the corner, eating slowly, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for something or someone. Shrugging it off, they ordered their meals and sat down. As they ate, Jamal felt an uneasy sensation, like someone was staring at him. When he glanced toward the man, he froze. The stranger was no longer eating. He was just staring directly at Jamal, smiling unnaturally wide, the skin around his eyes tight and pale. Jamal blinked, thinking he imagined it, but when he looked again, the man's hand was pointed toward their table. One of the friends laughed nervously and said, "Probably just weird, don't look too much." But Jamal couldn't shake the feeling. He excused himself to the restroom, walking past the stranger. The man's eyes followed him relentlessly, and when Jamal reached the restroom, he noticed something horrifying. The restroom mirror had smeared fingerprints forming words. "I see you." Heart pounding, Jamal rushed back to his friends, only to find the table empty. Their bags, phones, and food were gone. Panicking, he ran toward the counter to alert the staff, but the place was completely deserted. Not a single employee, no sign of his friends. The lights flickered and then went out entirely, plunging the building into darkness. Jamal heard faint whispers from the back of the restaurant, like dozens of voices overlapping, all calling his name. He bolted toward the exit, fumbling with the doors, but the front glass wouldn't budge. When the lights flickered back, he was alone, the restaurant eerily quiet, tables overturned, a greasy trail leading toward the kitchen. He never saw his friends again. The police found the building abandoned days later, no security footage capturing anything after the group walked in. The only thing left was a note, scrawled in what looked like chicken grease on the counter. "Next time, we eat you first." Even years later, locals whisper that late at night, the KFC in that part of town still flickers and groans as if alive, and that anyone who dines there alone might hear faint whispers calling their name from the back.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
It was a hot Friday night when a group of college friends decided to grab some late-night food from a nearby KFC. The place was unusually empty for a Friday, the kind of quiet that makes small noises echo like warnings. They laughed off the eeriness as they waited for their order, chatting and scrolling through their phones. As they sat down, one of them noticed something strange. A man behind the counter wasn't moving in the usual fast-paced rhythm of fast food workers. He was just staring blankly at the wall, his eyes unfocused, hands twitching slightly. At first, they thought he was joking, playing the creepy employee thing. But when the manager came out, he looked alarmed, then panicked, and whispered something they couldn't hear. Suddenly, the lights flickered. One friend tried to call out to the staff, but the phones in their hands went dead at the same time. The man behind the counter slowly turned toward them, and that's when they noticed the blood. Dark, thick streaks across his uniform and arms. It wasn't fresh, but the smell hit them instantly, acrid and metallic. One friend bolted toward the exit, but the doors wouldn't open. They were locked from the inside. The group ran to the kitchen area, where they found something that made their stomachs twist. On the floor were deep scratches on the tile, like someone or something had been dragged across it. In the corner, a small, broken cage held a handful of chickens that were dead, some missing feathers in a pattern that looked disturbingly deliberate, almost ritualistic. The man's whispers grew louder, turning into a low, guttural chant as he advanced toward them, dragging a knife along the floor, its metal scraping against the tiles like fingernails on a chalkboard. Panicked, they found a back door and managed to pry it open. As they ran into the night, They glanced back and saw the KFC from the outside. It looked normal again. The lights were steady, the man behind the counter was gone, and the manager was calmly wiping down the counter as if nothing had happened. When they reported it later, the local authorities checked the place, but the CCTV footage had been wiped, and employees claimed no such incident occurred. Months later, one of the friends saw a news story about a fast food worker who had gone missing under mysterious circumstances in a town miles away. The photo looked eerily familiar. It was the same man, still wearing a blood-stained uniform. The friends never went near a KFC again, but sometimes, when they're driving late at night, they swear they see the same blank, staring eyes in the drive-through mirrors, following them home.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 6.
It was a sweltering summer night, the kind where the air feels thick and every shadow seems alive. Marcus was working the late shift at the KFC near the outskirts of town, a place most people avoided after dark. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting uneven glows over the greasy floors. It was quiet at first, too quiet, but Marcus didn't mind. He liked the solitude until he started noticing the whispers. At first, he thought it was the vent system, rattling and groaning like an old haunted house. But then he heard it again, unmistakable this time. "Help me," soft, desperate, echoing from the walk-in freezer. Curiosity and dread fought inside him, but something compelled him to investigate. He opened the freezer door, and the icy air hit him like a slap. His breath came out in misty puffs. There was nothing at first, just rows of frozen chicken and a faint metallic smell. Then he saw it, scrawled across the frosted walls, deep enough to have burned into the surface. "Don't trust him." Marcus froze. The words didn't make sense. Who would write that inside a freezer? He backed out, heart hammering, and tried to shake off the feeling, but the whispers didn't stop. They got louder, closer, circling the store like a predator. When he turned toward the fryer, he thought he saw a figure in the reflection of the oil, tall, pale, with hollow eyes and a grin that didn't belong to a living person. He ran to the manager's office, slammed the door, and locked it. The whispers turned into a scream, and the lights exploded all at once, plunging the store into darkness. Marcus fumbled for his phone, but the battery was dead. Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone walking on the ceiling tiles. He dared to glance up and saw nothing but shadows shifting unnaturally. Minutes felt like hours. When the lights finally flickered back on, everything looked normal. The fryer bubbled, the registers beeped, and the store smelled like fried chicken. Marcus exhaled shakily, convincing himself it was a hallucination. But as he wiped sweat from his brow, he noticed a handprint in the frost of the freezer door. Fresh, human, and pointing straight at him. Marcus never stayed for another late shift, but the next day, a new employee reported hearing whispers in the freezer. He didn't last the week. Some say the KFC is cursed, and that whatever haunts it feeds on the fear of those who work alone at night. Marcus refuses to ever set foot there again, and sometimes, when he drives past, he swears he sees a figure watching him from the corner of the building, waiting for the next night shift.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 7.
There was a young man named Chris who worked the late night shift at a small KFC on the outskirts of town. The location barely had any customers after 10 p.m. And most nights it was just him, one cook in the back, and the hum of the fluorescent lights that always seemed too dim. Chris liked the job well enough. It was easy, quiet, and he could pocket some extra hours since hardly anyone else wanted to close. But he quickly learned that something about that store wasn't right after dark. One night, around 11:30, Chris was wiping down the counter when the front door slowly creaked open. No chime rang like it normally did, just the faint scrape of metal against tile, as if someone had pushed the door but wasn't fully stepping in. He looked up and saw no one, just the door swaying slightly in the breeze. He called out a quick "hello," but got nothing back. The cook in the back didn't hear a thing, and Chris figured maybe a gust of wind caught the latch. He shut the door, locked it tight, and went back to cleaning. About 15 minutes later, the fryers in the kitchen suddenly kicked on by themselves. The oil bubbled and hissed like someone had dropped food in, but the cook swore he hadn't touched anything. Chris checked the baskets and saw nothing inside, but the smell of fresh fried chicken started filling the room. It was so strong that both of them gagged. It was too much, as if someone had dumped dozens of pieces into invisible oil. The sound lasted for nearly a minute, then died out. The room went completely silent again, except for the faint sizzle of grease settling. Trying to laugh it off, Chris went back to the register. That's when he noticed greasy handprints on the counter. They weren't smudges from cleaning. They were long, dark, and wet, dripping down the side as if someone had pressed their palms there just seconds before. He froze, looking toward the glass windows, but the parking lot was empty except for his car. The cook came out of the back, pale, insisting they should close early, but before either of them moved, the drive-through headset on Chris's ear crackled alive. A voice whispered through the static. It wasn't clear at first, just low breathing, then words that made his stomach twist. "I'm already inside." Chris ripped the headset off, his hands shaking. The cook grabbed the keys and said they were leaving now, no matter what. As they rushed toward the exit, they both stopped dead. The door they had locked earlier was standing wide open again, swaying gently, the night air rolling in. Chris swore he saw a figure standing just beyond the glow of the parking lot lights, tall, thin, and swaying like it wasn't standing on solid ground. It didn't move closer. It didn't move at all, just stared. They bolted to Chris's car without even locking the store behind them. Neither of them went back that night. When Chris returned the next day with the morning crew, everything seemed normal. The fryers were cold. The counters were spotless. But in the condensation on the inside of the front door, written in a long, streaky finger trail, were 3 words that made him quit on the spot. "Still here, Chris."
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 8.
It was a late Friday night when Sarah decided to grab some KFC on her way home from work. The streets were almost empty, the occasional flicker of streetlights casting shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should. She pulled into the KFC parking lot, noticing that the place was eerily quiet. No music, no chatter, just the hum of the fluorescent lights inside. That should have been her first warning. When she walked in, she noticed the staff looked tense, almost scared, huddled together near the back. A young man at the counter forced a smile, asking for her order in a voice that was too high-pitched, too shaky. Sarah ordered her usual meal and went to the corner to wait, tapping her foot nervously. Something felt off. The scent of fried chicken was overwhelming, almost cloying, but underneath it there was a faint coppery smell, like blood. Suddenly she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. In the back kitchen, a figure hunched over a tray of raw chicken. But it wasn't just preparing food. It was carving something. Sarah squinted, her stomach tightening. The figure turned, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a human face peering back at her from the fryer's reflection. She shook her head, trying to convince herself it was just a trick of the light. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Leave now. Don't look back." Her heart raced. She stood up, pretending to pay, and glanced toward the exit. The staff had stopped moving. Every single one of them was staring at her, eyes wide, almost pleading or warning. She didn't wait for change. She bolted out the door, her bag of food forgotten on the counter. As she ran to her car, she thought she heard whispers following her, soft, almost laughing, but distorted, like a chorus of voices from somewhere below the fryer. She drove home, shaking, vowing never to step foot in that KFC again. The next day, she tried to call the location to complain, to ask what had been happening, but the number was disconnected. The building was boarded up, abandoned, and the news reported nothing unusual, just temporary closure for renovations. Sarah still wonders what she saw in that kitchen that night. Sometimes, late at night, she swears she smells fried chicken on the breeze outside her apartment, and when she looks, she catches a glimpse of a shadowy figure staring at her from across the street, hulking, hunched, always just out of reach. She doesn't eat KFC anymore, but she knows it's not about the chicken. Whatever she saw that night is still out there, waiting, hungry.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 9.
Late one night, a college student named Arif was driving home from his night shift when his stomach growled. The only place open was a KFC on the edge of town, a place he had never really liked but now had no choice. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a flickering streetlight and a sense of quiet that felt wrong. Inside, the smell of fried chicken was overpowering, almost cloying, but he shrugged it off and ordered a bucket for himself. He sat alone in a corner booth, scrolling through his phone while picking at his food. Every few minutes, he felt like someone was watching him. He glanced around, but there was no one there. The place was nearly deserted, except for a tired-looking employee wiping down tables in the distance. Shrugging it off again, he ate quickly. By the time he reached the last piece of chicken, a strange feeling crawled up his spine. The air around him seemed heavier, the lights flickering slightly. Then, he noticed it on the wall, behind the counter, reflected in the stainless steel, a pair of eyes staring directly at him. They didn't belong to the employee. The employee's back was turned and no one else was inside. Panic hit him and he grabbed his food, nearly dropping it as he stumbled toward the exit. As he reached the door, the lights went out completely, plunging the restaurant into darkness. The faint hum of the freezer was the only sound until a low, raspy whisper echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have eaten that." Arif bolted to his car, heart hammering, and drove home without stopping. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he swore he could see the same pair of eyes staring from the shadows of his bedroom. When he woke the next morning, he found something chilling on his counter. One piece of chicken from the KFC bucket, cold and untouched, with a single message scrawled in grease: "Still hungry." After that night, Arif never ate KFC again, and he avoided that branch entirely. Locals would sometimes whisper that the store had a special batch for late-night customers, but no one would say exactly what happened to them or why the eyes always seemed to follow.